Mandala offering by Mr. Thupten Sawang La, President of Ladakh Buddhist Association, and Gen Shitup Chambal, President of Ladakh Gonpa Association. Your Holiness, the jewel of the universe, you are the unappointed friend of all beings on earth, the refuge and guardian of Tibetans, the master without equal in the triple world, the guide of gods and humans, the refuge and guardian, the chief master among the victorious Buddhas. You are the omniscient one, first-sighted master with all-encompassing knowledge. I respectfully bow at your the Holy Lotus Feet. Having said that, I, on behalf of His Eminence Captain Thiksey Rinpoche, the Ladakh Buddhist Association, the Ladakh Gonpa Association, and the entire people of Ladakh bow to Your Holiness and pay my humble respect to you with my three doors, body, speech, and mind. For 2 years now, 2019 and 20, Your Holiness had not been able to visit Ladakh, and so all our devotees, Buddhists and non-Buddhists, missed you immensely. Therefore, we made our request to you for visits this year to 21 again. Despite our efforts, it has become impossible for you to visit us this year too because of the widespread coronavirus pandemic. Therefore, His Eminence Thiksey Rinpoche, the Ladakh Buddhist Association, the Ladakh Gonpa Association, have requested Your Holiness to give a Dharma discourse to our people through the webcast over the internet. Accordingly, Your Holiness has graciously consented to give teaching on Master Atisha's Land for the Path to Enlightenment. Your teaching coincides with the occasion of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma by Lord Buddha, the kind and compassionate founder teacher of Buddhism. On behalf of the entire people of Ladakh, lay people as well as monastics and young and old, I would like to thank Your Holiness from the core of my heart and the marrow of my bones for giving us your vast and profound teachings. I wish to greet you with Teshidele Kinjule. For your information, Your Holiness, we have made an arrangement for the public to have access to Your Holiness's teaching at different places in Ladakh, including Joe Temple in Ladakh, Leh City, various branches of LBA in Nopra, Changtangkar, Gu, Sham, Kargil, and Danskar. May all be virtuous. So today, to the faithful people of Ladakh, lay as well as monastics, as requested, I have agreed to give teaching on Georgie, the Atisha's Lamb for the Path to Enlightenment. I'm very happy for that. And in Tibet, there had been earlier and later dissemination of Buddhism. And at some point of time, Buddhism had declined so much so in Tibet. And at that time, in Ngari region, there was a lord of Dharma, Dharma king in Tuling. So since the time of Lang Dharma, because of the decline that has been caused to Buddhism in Tibet, the king had this urge to preserve the Buddhism in Tibet, and therefore he wished to invite Master Atisha to Tibet, and therefore Master Atisha came to Tibet, and in Tuling, Atisha wrote this text, Lamb for the Path to Enlightenment. So Ngari Chogyal, the Dharma king of Ngari, was quite honest with Master Atisha, saying that he didn't need to give a very long teaching, because that would for that he would have to go through all the Kanjur and Tenjur literature, and therefore, because there was so much decline in Buddhism in Tibet, the Ngari Chogyal requested Atisha to give a very brief teaching, and therefore Master Atisha wrote this text, and in the text itself it says, urged by the good disciple Changchubu. So, without looking for any offerings or anything like that, as Changchubu requested his teaching to Master Atisha, and Atisha was very pleased, and therefore he says in the text, urged by the good disciple Changchubu, So with regard to Sakya Lamde tradition of the Sakya tradition, with regard to the stages of the path to enlightenment, it's the same with other traditions as well. And then in the Kagyu tradition, and then the ornament of the jewel liberation by Gonpa, and then Je Rinpoche wrote a great exposition of the stages of the path to enlightenment, a great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, and then there is an intermediate length, stages of the path to enlightenment, and then a short, concise Lamrim. And so the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment is very detailed exposition on the graded path to enlightenment. And then he wrote the middle length stages of the path to enlightenment, and then the short or concise Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, or it is also known as the Songs of Experience. So with regard to the common path, the training in the common path to leading to enlightenment, all the various Tibetan Buddhist traditions have the same source for that, which is the Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. And so, as you have requested to give this teaching, I'm giving the teaching on this text today and tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 4th day of the 6th Tibetan month, which is called the Chogor Dujen, the great auspicious day of the turning of the wheel of Dharma. So this is a very great, very special occasion as well. And so both the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition, so the teaching which encompasses both these traditions is the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, or the Four Truths for the Aryas, or noble beings. And so tomorrow is the day which coincides with the Buddha setting the Dharma in motion, the first sermon that he gave. And then I'll also do a Bodhichitta ceremony, which would be befitting for this occasion, I thought. So I received the teaching on the lamp for the path to enlightenment from Tata Rinpoche and Ling Rinpoche, Gyabje Ling Rinpoche, and also Gyabje Dijan Rinpoche, and Kunduram Tenzin Gyaltsen Rinpoche, perhaps. So I have received this teaching on this text from many lamas, many masters. So regarding the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, and the training of mind, I do the practice of these two traditions or genre of teachings on a daily basis, which covers the teachings on the extensive path of conduct, as well as the profound view of emptiness. And so I do practice these two, and this forms the basis of my practice for even the tantric practice. And I do the Hevajra practice, Hevajra Tantra practice, which comes from the Sakya tradition. And then also I do Yoja Yogini, and so I do the practice of the the practice lineage. And with regards to my practice of So I do the practice of all these different lineages or genres of teaching called the extensive path, conduct, and then the profound view, and that of the practice lineage blessings. So all these teachings have been translated from India, and therefore in the beginning of the teaching, the texts or the different teachings, there's mention of in the language of India. Of course, there are few texts in our Kanjur and Tenjur which were translated from Chinese, and so. But majority of the texts were translated from India, and therefore it says in the language of India. So the purpose of giving the title in Sanskrit is in order to leave some imprint of the Sanskrit language in our minds, as well as with the sense of gratitude, to have a sense of gratitude. And so the text says, Bodhi, Patha, Pradhipam. And so Bodhi refers to the enlightenment, Path, the path, and Deepam is the lamp, so lamp for the path to enlightenment. And then regarding the homage to the Bodhisattva, the youthful Manjushri, of course we have deities like Manjushri, Lady Tara, and so forth. So with regard to Manjushri, Manjushri is the deity of wisdom and knowledge, and so because of that reason, Jambayang or Manjushri's practice is held as primary practice in our tradition, because we need to develop the spirit of enlightenment and so forth, helped by this wisdom, realizing the true nature of things. So the place, my birthplace, nearby Kumbum, is nearby Kumbum, and in Kumbum monastery there is some area, and many people are doing also the prostrations in the at the temple, and I also heard many children reciting, small children reciting Arapasana, the mantra of Manjushri. So that was when I was a very small child. I didn't know. I didn't have any knowledge of the Dharma, but it was quite a show or a spectacle for me. Maybe I was 3 years old at that time. And then after reaching Lhasa, I practiced. I did practice based on Manjushri, and so I trained myself in developing my wisdom. And it seems the Arapacana Di mantra seems to be helpful in developing our intelligence. So I recite this verse, which says. Which is a praise to Manjushri, which says, I pay homage to Sri Manju Ghosha, who bears the youthful form, is adorned with the lamp of wisdom, and dispels the darkness of triple world. And so Manjushri helps to dispel the darkness of our ignorance from our mind stream. And so when you do your practice primarily to develop wisdom and knowledge, with regards to the text, translated texts, those texts which pertain to wisdom, the translators pay homage to Manjushri, and the Vinaya texts In the Vinaya text, the homage is paid to the omniscient one. And so from this translator's homage, we can tell which of the three collections of the teachings of the Buddha the text belongs to. Those of the Abhidharma text, for Abhidharma text, we have Manjushri as the object of homage. And then, regarding the text itself, I pay homage with great respect to all the victorious ones of the three times, to their teaching, and to those who aspire to virtue. Urged by the good disciple Changchupa, I shall illuminate the lamp for the path to enlightenment. And so these texts are meant for someone who is a beginner in the practice or the teaching of the Dharma, who should train themselves in a systematic way. And so within this teaching, there are teachings for those, teachings pertaining to beings of small or faculty, and then the intermediate faculty and great faculty. And so those so for those of the disciples or followers who wish to so it says, know that those who by whatever means seek for themselves no more than the pleasure of cyclic existence are persons of least capacity. And then those who aspire to reach liberation for themselves alone are the beings of intermediate scope. And then those who do not look for their own enlightenment just for the sake of themselves alone, but for the sake of all sentient beings, and who wish to reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, because in order to be able to help other sentient beings in accordance with their mental capacity, dispositions, interests, and inclinations, one needs to have the knowledge of people's interests and so forth, precisely, unmistakenly, and therefore you need to reach Buddhahood for that, and therefore someone who aspires to that stage of an omniscience is a being of a great capacity. And so the text says, understand there are three kinds of persons because of their small, middling, and supreme capacities. I shall write clearly distinguishing their individuals. And then the next verse is the criteria or the qualifications of the beings with small capacity. Know that those who by whatever means seek for themselves no more than the pleasures of cyclic existence are persons of the least capacity. So they understand the threats or the fear of, they have the fear of the lower realms of existence, and see the three refuges as the one who can help them out of this. And therefore they seek refuge in the three jewels for them to be freed from the cyclic existence or from the lower realms of existence. And then next one says, those who seek peace for themselves alone, with which, motivated by which, they practice the three trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom, and avoiding destructive actions are said to be middling capacity. So those of the small capacity practice the 10 virtuous actions, avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions. And those who, through their personal suffering, truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacities. Suffering comes about not without any causes and conditions. And so the causes and conditions are those of the afflictive emotions or mental afflictions and the karmas. So those who through their personal suffering truly want to end complete all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. Next verse, number 6. For those excellent living beings who desire supreme enlightenment, I shall explain the perfect methods taught by the spiritual teachers. And number 7, facing paintings, statues, and so forth of the completely enlightened one, reliquaries, and the excellent teaching, offer flower, incense, whatever you have. And the verse number 8, with the 7-part offering from the prayer of noble conduct, and with the thought never to turn back till you gain ultimate enlightenment. With strong faith in the 3 jewels. Verse number 9, kneeling with one knee on the ground and your hands pressed together. First of all, take refuge 3 times. And next, number 10, next, beginning with an attitude of love for all living creatures, consider beings, excluding none, suffering in the 3 bad rebirths, suffering with birth, death, and so forth. So because of our mental afflictions, destructive emotions, and creating, because of which creating the karma and therefore suffering in the cycle of existence, just as you yourself are like in this condition, likewise you should understand other beings in the same condition. And so the samsaric beings, in other words, who are under the sway of mental afflictions, and because of which they create karma, and through that they suffer. And so with regard to the root of our afflictions, it is said in the 400 verses, just as the physical faculty permeates all other faculties, likewise ignorance permeates all other afflictive emotions. And therefore, the Master Arya Deva also says that one should begin teaching on the dependent origination of things, how things are dependently arisen, in order to cut or uproot that ignorance. So all our afflictive emotions, destructive emotions, arise in us because of this grasping at true existence and independent existence of self. And these afflictions leave their imprint, and the residual latency that is left on the mind is called obscuration to knowledge. And so, without being able to overcome all these afflictions as well as their latent potencies, we cannot know everything as they are, and therefore one should have the determination to reach Buddhahood. So the afflictive emotions as well as their latent potencies needs to be uprooted. And therefore, for that reason, in order to be able to do that, overcome them, there's no other way than reaching Buddhahood. So, in order to be able to help others completely, fully, when there's no other way than becoming a Buddha. So, verse number 11 says, then since you have this, you want to free these beings from the suffering of pain, from suffering of and causes of suffering, arouse immutably the resolve to attain enlightenment. And verse number 12, the qualities of developing such an aspiration are fully explained in by Maitreya in the array of trunk sutras. Having learned about the infinite benefits of the intention to gain full enlightenment by reading the sutra or listening to a teacher, arouse it repeatedly to make it steadfast. The sutra requested by Viradatta fully explains the merit therein. At this point, in summary, I'll cite just 3 verses. And so, Verses 15, 16, and 17 are quotation from the Sutra Request of Viradatta. Verse number 18, having developed the aspiration for enlightenment, constantly enhance it through concerted effort to remember it in this and also in other lives. Keep the precepts properly as explained. So with regard to cultivation of bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, altruistic spirit of enlightenment, there are two systems or traditions. One is the sevenfold cause and effect instruction, and then the other is called the equaling and exchanging self and others. And so with regard to the former, there are 7 factors. The first 6 forming the cause, and then the 7th one is bodhicitta, which is the result. And so recognizing all mother sentient beings, and mother sentient beings, all sentient beings having been one's mother, remembering their kindness, repaying their kindness, and loving affection, and then compassion, and then the extraordinary resolve, and then finally giving rise to bodhicitta. And then the second tradition or system is equaling and exchanging self and others. So here you go through the practice of equaling oneself with others. That is because of wanting to be happiness and not wanting suffering, being same in that. And then you do also the exchange of your happiness and joy with the suffering of others. So this is very powerful practice.
소소소타 직등기 어디리게다 저블 결론 엔 마타이 베케니 어디리게 소다 직등기.
So without the vows of engaged intention, perfect aspiration will not grow. Make effort definitely to take it, since you want the wish for enlightenment to grow. And so in the verse number 20, those who maintain any of the 7 kinds of individual liberation vows have the ideal prerequisite for the bodhisattva vow, not others. And verse number 21, the Tathagata spoke of 7 kinds of individual liberation vow. The best of these is glorious pure conduct, said to be the vow of a fully ordained person. The Buddha himself became a self-ordained as a fully ordained monk. And then there had been 7 successors to the Buddha who were entrusted the teaching. And then the great Indian masters were all celibate monks. So the bhikshu vow, or the fully ordained person's vow, is considered the supreme of the 7 individual liberation vows. According to the ritual described in the chapter on discipline in the Bodhisattva stages, or the Bodhisattva Bhumi by Masa Sangha, take the vow from a good and well-qualified spiritual teacher. In this morality chapter, ethics or morality chapter of this Bodhisattva Bhumi, there is detailed explanation of how to take the Bodhisattva vows, the ritual. So this tradition had at some point declined, and so I took this vow based on the ethics chapter of Bodhisattva Bhumi in front of the Buddha statue in the main Mahabodhi temple, the statue in Bodh Gaya. Understand that a good spiritual teacher is one skilled in the vow ceremony who lives by the vows and has the confidence and compassion to bestow it. And so this refers to taking the vow from in front of an image of a Buddha, However, in the case you try but cannot find such a spiritual teacher, I shall explain another correct procedure for taking the vow. So verse number 24 is that, and then verse number 25, I shall write here very clearly explained in ornament of Manjushri's Buddha Lance Sutra, how long ago, when Manjushri was Ambaraja, he aroused the intention to become enlightened. In the presence of the protectors, I arouse the intention to gain full enlightenment. I invite all beings as my guests and shall free them from cyclic existence. From this moment onwards, until I attain enlightenment, I shall not harbor harmful thoughts, anger, avarice, and envy. So verse number 28 also read. Verse number 29, I shall not be eager to reach enlightenment in the quickest way. So this says that you do not wish to become enlightened for your sake alone. Just as in the Lama Chöpa it says, even if I have to live in the hell realm for 100 eons and so, I will never feel tired to work for sentient beings. And as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the transmigrators, as said in Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara. So this gives helps to build up your courage to work for others.
I shall
purify limitless, inconceivable lands and remain in the 10 directions for all those who call my name. I shall purify all my bodily and my verbal forms of activity, my mental activities too. I shall purify and do nothing that is non-virtuous. So verse number 31, I shall purify, or 31 done, and then 32, those who observing the vow of the active intention have trained well in the 3 forms of discipline, their respect for these 3 forms of discipline grows, which causes purity of body, speech, and mind. So as it is said in the ritual for bodhisattva vows, in order to fulfill the aims of myself and others, I shall generate bodhicitta. And in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara it says, all happiness comes from wishing others to be happy. All suffering that we suffer comes from wishing oneself alone to be happy. What need is there to say more? Look at the difference between the Buddhas and those of the ordinary sentient beings. So if we look at the world, because of our selfishness, lots of problems and troubles, difficulties happen in the world. Such as wars, conflicts, and telling lie to others are done because of wishing one's, because of selfishness. So as it is said also in Bodhisattva Charyavatara, unless you exchange your joy and happiness with the suffering of others, live alone, reaching Buddhahood. Even in samsara there is no happiness. And therefore, which intelligent person would despair, feel discouraged to ride the horse of bodhicitta, which leads one from blissful state to blissful state? And then in chapter 3, of Bodhisattva Charyavatara, So the practices of Tantra are not to use black magic or sorcery against others, but to overcome our mental afflictions and all these defilements that are within our minds. So verse number 34. So because sentient beings have varieties of dispositions and mental dispositions, inclination, their inclination, interests, and their imprints are different. And so not only just the immediate factors of these, but because of their karmas that they have created over many lifetimes. So though you may give a teaching which is good, but if it does not befit the sentient beings, it would not help. For example, the Bodhisattva practice of disregarding one's own happiness and cherishing others' happiness more than oneself. So people without a good imprint will not be able to be pleased by such teachings, and they may perhaps become discouraged. I cannot do this. They may feel. So verse number 34 says, all Buddhas say the cause for the completion of the collections, whose nature is merit and exalted wisdom, is the development of higher perception or clairvoyance. Just as the bird with undeveloped wings cannot fly in the sky, those without the power of higher perception cannot work for the good of living beings. And verse number 36 also read. And then I'll stop here for today. And next, we'll come across those of the single-pointed concentration and special insight. And so I will do the Bodhisattva ceremony for Bodhicitta tomorrow as well. So I will be happy to reply, to answer as many questions as you may ask. So it will be like debate. If the questions are difficult, tough, then I may have to think more. So it would help me as well. And so don't ask me easy questions, but tough ones as well. So verse number 36, 37 read.
Inje rangzug phakchok chandrazik mi gargi namrol tulpeku galve shashchok tanzin gyatsola losna iti guske chaksalo.
With my due respect to your holiness, you are the embodiment of the emanation of Avalokiteshvara. I'm Dharma Tsering. My question is, in the lamp for the path of enlightenment, it speaks of generating bodhicitta through the sevenfold cause and effect method. It is clear that seeing every sentient being as having been your mother requires one to believe in the concept of past and future lives. However, for those who do not believe in past and future lives, is there a way for them to apply the sevenfold cause and effect method to generate bodhicitta? That's true. What you are saying is true. So the sevenfold cause and effect method begins with the recognition of all sentient beings having been one's mother and so forth. So for those who might doubt about past and future lives, it would be difficult to use this method. And so they need to understand past and future lives through the texts which deal with logic and reasoning as well to prove past and future lives. But the easier way for them may be so as Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, all happiness in the world comes from wishing oneself, others to be happy. All suffering comes from wishing oneself to be happy. So the more altruistic, compassionate you are towards others, you are going to reap the benefit of having a peaceful mind. And because of that, you will have a good, healthy body as well. So bodhicitta is something that I emphasize in my practice. As my main practice, this sevenfold cause and effect seems quite distant from me, whereas this equaling and exchanging self and others seems to help to crush this self-cherishing attitude and holding others, cherishing others over oneself. And so this tradition of developing bodhicitta that has come down to us through Shantideva is a very powerful method to develop bodhicitta within ourselves. So the more you are compassionate towards others, caring for others, you will have a calm state of mind, peaceful state of mind. So the non-virtuous actions that you have created that are in relation to others can also be overcome through this practice of equaling and exchanging self and others. And so the sevenfold cause and effect method, for that you need to be able to prove past and future lives. So even if you do not believe in past and future lives, there is no need to reason out to them that you want happiness and want to avoid suffering. So if you want peace of mind, this will come through the familiarization of your mind with altruism, love and compassion. So even the scientists do agree with that. So the more compassionate, kind you are, the happier you will be. And because of that, peace of mind, you will help your physical health as well. And so because of physical health, your hair also will not become gray. So the more black hair also remains. So I usually jokingly tell people that my gray and black hair are competing with each other. And so this self-equaling and exchanging self and others method of cultivating bodhicitta really helps you to have the courage to work for others. And even if you may have provocators, you will feel more compassionate to them. And so, as the Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, unless you exchange your joy and happiness with others' suffering, there's no way you can reach Buddhahood. And then at the end of the third chapter, as Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, so if you wish to If you wish to be selfish, be wisely selfish by working and thinking of working for others, by developing bodhicitta within yourself. So this will lead you to Buddhahood. So if you do, even if you may not believe in past and future lives, if you think along this exchanging self and others, it'll help. So you do not need to prove past and future lives, saying, oh, just a just-born child, regarding a just-born child, his mind has a preceding moment, because it is a mind or consciousness. And so you will not have anxiety as well, how well I will be, how what will happen to me, and so forth. So Bodhisattva Charyavatara also says, today in the presence of the old protectors, I invite Transmigrators as my guests to the Sugadahood, and in the meantime, the temporal happiness, temporal happiness, God, demigods, and others rejoice. So there was offering of tea and so with due respect to Your Holiness, Your Holiness, you are an embodiment of compassion and love. Your Holiness, I'm Tenzin Setten. So the lamp for the path to enlightenment speaks of the path in Sutrayana first, and then presents a tantric path. What is the reason and purpose for this sequence? Please clarify. So this follows a realistic path. So in the beginning, in the Sutrayana path, you develop bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness. So without having this good foundation of these two, there is no way you can do tantric practice. So the Buddha himself also gave the teaching, first teaching on the Four Noble Truths, and then the Perfection of Wisdom teachings. And during the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, he also went into the teaching on the subjective clear-light mind. And then he led the disciples to the tantric path. And so, in practical terms, without the bodhicitta, your wisdom of emptiness will not become a cause for Buddhahood or omniscient mind. And so bodhicitta becomes the foundation. And without that and understanding of emptiness, you will not be able to do tantric practice, because you have to arise or visualize yourself arising into a deity from within the meditation on emptiness. And so the profundity of Tantra mainly comes from on the basis of this the clear light, subjective clear light mind. And so in order to do meditation on it, you need to understand the objective clear light, which is emptiness, the nature of things. So this subjective clear light mind, what happens to us is that things appear to have some kind of an objective independent existence. So you need to train your mind to understand that this subjective clear light mind is also devoid of any intrinsic existence. And so, with this understanding of emptiness, and also without this understanding of the clear light mind that is taught in Tantra, there's no way you can do Tantric practice. So, the Buddha himself has said this peaceful
so
the profound, peaceful, free from conceptual elaborations, luminous, unconditioned. So luminous, unconditioned nature shows that of the subjective clear light mind. So within which there are the coarse and the subtle so after the dissolution of the 80 different conceptual states of mind, you go through the dissolution of the whitish appearance, reddish increase, and blackish near attainment. And then finally you come to that of the clear light mind. So this verse, which says profound, peaceful, free from conceptual elaborations, luminous and unconditioned, leads you through a systematic path to lead to enlightenment. So we are following a tradition of Buddhism that has come down to us, which encompasses the entire teaching of the Buddha. The teachings that come from the first turnings of wheel of Dharma, and then the second turning of wheel of Dharma. And so we do study of all these teachings by first memorizing the root text, and then studying the meaning of those texts under a teacher, and also using debate, dialectical debate, which in Tibet was initiated by Chaba Chögyö Sengye. So with regard to the Pali tradition, of course they have marvelous practice of Vinaya, the monastic discipline, but they do not have this tradition of using logic and reason in a debate format. So Nalanda masters have also written texts on logic and epistemology with great emphasis on using them in our study of the Dharma. And then, during the time of, since the time of King Songtsen Gampo of Tibet, many Chinese Buddhist practitioners have also come to Tibet, but they do not pay much attention to studying and particularly doing critical analysis into the teaching of the Buddha. And then to the Chizong Detsen, the Tibetan Dharma emperor, found it important to use our critical faculty to analyze or investigate the teaching of the Buddha. And so he wasn't satisfied with the Chinese practitioners' tradition. And so he searched for an Indian master who would be able to disseminate this tradition of doing critical analysis into the teaching of the Buddha, and he found the Abbot Chandarakshita. So the great Abbot Chandarakshita did not give teachings on Tantra right away. He wrote a text on logic and epistemology, as well as text on Madhyamaka philosophy. And so he mainly taught these two subjects, logic, epistemology, and Madhyamaka. And so when we combine these two, it is one expression in Tibet developed, which is the crossed necks of the two lines of logic and epistemology and Madhyamaka. So with the help of the Madhyamaka view, we combat this true grasping at true existence in things. And that also is done through logic. And so this is very precious tradition that we have. And so that this tradition of studying logic and epistemology has become very important tradition in Tibet. And so this is thanks to Shantarakshita. And so, of course, Tantra is very profound, but that profundity is thanks to the sutra path in Tantra. Anyway, you go touch Tantra, the tantric practice, you come across this Om Swabhava mantra. So Om Swabhava means naturally free from false. So the first refers to the Om Swabhava Shuddha refers to the self-essence of persons, and Sarvadharma Swabhava Shuddha refers to the self-essence of phenomena. And so all phenomena are devoid, intrinsically devoid of any self-existence. And so one needs to go through the process, the triple process of study, reflection, and meditation. And so having studied the text, one should reflect on them, contemplate the meaning through logic and reasoning, so that you gain conviction in that and the teaching. And that conviction is used in your meditation. So we usually say Om Swabhava Shuddha Savadhamma Swabhava Shuddha Hang. Everything becomes empty. So, but if you have nothing to think about when you say emptiness, I mean, it doesn't help. So to make your practice of Tantra practically efficient, you need to have some experience of the view of emptiness and bodhicitta. And in Tantra, there is also the practice of single-pointed concentration, which is to develop, the developing shamatha. So you meditate on a deity, visualize yourself as a deity, and within that meditation you think that deity, yourself as a deity, is devoid of any intrinsic existence, yet you appear as a deity. And so that is the fact. Without the practice of bodhicitta and the wisdom of emptiness, there is no foundation for your tantric practice, and therefore this teaching that is given in this bodhicitta, so this, the lamp for the path of enlightenment is true.
Next question.
So if you go through them in the systematic way, you will have the experience. So next question is... Hello. In the land encircled by its snow mountains, the source of all good and happiness, as you, General Tenzin Gyatso Avalokiteshvara, may you live until the end of sun.
I am from Lamdun Model Senior Secondary School, Ladakh. I study in 8th standard. My question is, in the book called Changchuk Lamdun, it is written that but normally we say that for the benefit of all sentient beings, we should get enlightenment as fast as possible. But in context to this book, this seems to be very different. Could you please explain that why this differs? Thank you, Your Holiness.
상제기 고방
So
톰도 제하고라 셴도 주야기 아니 심슈
the intention or the motivation to become enlightened is in order to serve others. So, the reason why we need to become enlightened and reach Buddhahood is to be able to read others' mind thoroughly, precisely, so that we can help them according to their needs. And therefore, you wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So verse number 27 in Lamp for the Path to the Enlightenment says, the question was regarding this: I shall not be eager to reach enlightenment in the quickest way, but shall stay behind till the very end for the sake of a single being. So you need to first see the suffering nature of sentient beings. And with that understanding, you wish to become enlightened in order to liberate other sentient beings. And therefore, you want to be able to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so, although we do practice Tantra, you do not think of becoming enlightened as quickly as possible for your sake alone. So that if you have that kind of motivation, that doesn't serve as the foundation for your practice of Tantra or become to become enlightened. So, the Tantra teaching, which is a method to lead us to Buddhahood, is not that you want to become enlightened for your sake alone, and that you may gain wealth, long life, and so forth. So that doesn't become a tantric practice as such, and it doesn't become a Dharma practice as well. So without the bodhicitta, there's no way you can do a sincere or authentic tantric practice.
A very warm and pleasant good morning to His Holiness Dalai Lama. My name is Tanjan Sepal. I am a student from London Modern Senior Secondary School, studying in 8th standard. As in the book Changsuk Lamdon, it says, Jiltar dafshuk magesvid kala pur minus dejingonches tubzalve simshantunjit nusmamin, which means a bird with the unfledged wings cannot fly up to the sky. So without the super knowledge power,
so verse says, I shall
cannot work good for others.
Just as a bird with undeveloped wings cannot fly in the sky, those without the power of clear wings.
Having a super knowledge power to work good for others, and why without a super knowledge power, why others cannot work good for others? Thank you, Your Holiness.
So with regard to that, in order to be able to serve others or benefit others, you need to understand their character, nature, and interest or inclinations. And then when you go deeper, what kind of imprints they have. So accordingly, you may be able to give teachings to them. So otherwise, as it is said in the teaching of the Buddha, everything is empty. And so some people say, oh, the Buddhism says everything is nothing or empty. So there are people who do misinterpret such teachings. So when you do not know the whole structure of the teaching pertaining to the ground, the path, and the result, you may think, oh, when you hear about emptiness, that if you are told that the form is without any intrinsic existence, And so people do say that Buddhism is nihilist. So for someone who has all the prerequisites, such profound teachings may be given, because the Buddha himself didn't go right into the teaching of emptiness when he taught the Four Noble Truths. So he said suffering must be known, origin of suffering must be overcome, and so forth. And then he went on to say that suffering must be known, but there is nothing to be known, and so forth. And there's nothing to, that of the origin of suffering has to be overcome, but there's nothing to be overcome, and so forth. So, right after his enlightenment, the Buddha, after 49 days of remaining in silence without giving any teaching, as I said, quoted earlier, this profound, peaceful, free of conceptual elaboration, luminous and unconditioned, this nectar-like truth have I found. Even if it was taught to others, no one will understand it. So I shall remain silent in the forest. And so gods like Brahma and so forth came forth to request the Buddha to share his experience of the truth of the Dharma to others. And so he gave the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. So right after his enlightenment, or not long before after his enlightenment, he gave teaching on the Four Noble Truths. And he didn't go into the perfection of wisdom teachings at that time, but later, as time went by, he gave teaching to the disciples who have become more matured for such teaching of the perfection of wisdom. He gave teaching at the Gritakutta, the Vulture Peak. And so in this teaching of the perfection of wisdom, the Buddha lays out precisely and thoroughly what the emptiness nature of the phenomena. And then, for those who have matured further, he gave the teaching on the subject of clear light mind in Tathagata Garbha Sutra, so which is the Buddha nature. So in accordance, the Buddha, in accordance with the capacity, the intellectual capacity of his followers, gave these teachings at different times. So according to the different dispositions of the disciples, he gave teaching, and he was able to do that because of his clairvoyance, or being able to read others' minds. So if you have clairvoyance, reading others' minds and reading past and future lives, being able to know past and future lives and so forth, then you'll be able to see the different imprints of beings.
라면 거네 배 서부시 숨보이나야 코프게 따다 말을 버치네. 아니 최고 군집시아 소르던 저기.
So if the teachings that a Lama gives does not fit or the mental disposition of a disciple, it may cause to lose faith in the disciple. And so clairvoyance. So of course, we do not have clairvoyance, but we still do divination using dice or so when people are request for teachings. So of course the Sutrayana teachings may not be that difficult, but with regard to Tantric teachings we do this divination whether we should give the teaching or not as requested. So because of, though we do not have clairvoyance, we do more divination to decide whether we should give the teachings requested, tantric teachings that are requested by them.
Holiness Dalai Lama jiwa teaches kap just ba tukjichi ningai jiwani nangpa dang issue dang Hindu dang dejin chus lugyan thamchat ki chot dang.
So is it possible to compile all the good views and deeds from all the world's religions such as Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism and so forth and merge them into just one religion? This is from Pema Yudun. So usually I talk about warm-heartedness without having to talk about past and future lives, karmic causality, or past and future lives. So whether you are Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, or Jew, all talk about kindness, warm-heartedness. And so this is the basis for all religions to be in harmony. So because all teachings, all these different religions teach people to be kind and have a good heart. So though philosophically there may be differences, even within Buddhism, in the Nalanda tradition, we have the different philosophical schools, such as Sutrantika, Vaibhashika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamakas. And within the Madhyamakas, there are those of the Prasangikas, Savatantrika Madhyamakas, and Prasankika Madhyamakas, and so forth. So there are differences in philosophically. So in Christianity, they talk about Creator God, and in Hinduism also, many do assert a Creator God, and others do not. And then other religious traditions, for example, Jainism does not believe in a Creator God, and Buddhism does not believe in Creator God. Whereas there are other traditions which do believe in Creator God. So all these different religious traditions, though different in their philosophical idea, but they have the common practice of love and kindness. So I don't know if all religions can, if we can actually merge all religions into one. So we should leave all religions as they are, following their own faith traditions, but we can have the common practice of good heart, love, compassion, and so forth. So all religions of the world do coexist in India. So the followers do practice their own respective religions, but the practice of non-violence, practice of is something which all have the practice. And then we should also know that in these different teachings, traditions are mutually coexisting with one another in India. So I respect all religious traditions in the world. So the leaders of these different religious traditions I meet. So there's nothing wrong in that. So all religions teach not to harm others, but to help. But to help others. So in accordance with the individual mental disposition, we have the different religious traditions, whichever befits the individuals. So, but commonly we have the practice of not harming others and being kind to others. So this is the last question. Your Holiness, please can you explain how the generation of the renunciation becomes a cause for cultivating compassion? So, with regard to compassion, it is this sense of being unable to bear the suffering of others and wishing them to be free from suffering. And then you go on further to determine that may it be overcome. So, with regard to suffering, there are three different types of suffering: suffering of suffering, changeable suffering, and the existential conditioned pervasive suffering. So the main focus when we think about suffering of beings is the third one. So you wish other sentient beings to be free from this third kind of suffering, the pervasive conditioning existential suffering. And together with that, you also think of overcoming the imprints of this kind of suffering and their causes. So this is what compassion is. So any question? Any question?
배지다입니다. 다저는
So the remaining part of the text I will do tomorrow.
This is
the last question. So verse number, the question pertains to verse number 20.
So
with regard to the individual liberation vow, there are those of the layperson's vows as well as monastic vows. So with regard to the laypersons, if you take the Upasaka vows, Genyen, and on top of that, if you do take Bodhisattva vows, that would be more powerful. So, without having any of this individual liberation vows, I don't know if you can... I don't know if it is the case that you will not be able to have the Bodhisattva vows. But if you have whether a layperson's vow or a monastic vow, individual liberation vows, then you will be, if you take Bodhisattva vows, it will be make a greater difference. So the question basically was whether the someone who has the Bodhisattva, the layperson's vow, the individual liberation vow, if they take a Bodhisattva vow, will that individual liberation vow become the Bodhisattva vow, is it transformed or not? So when you take individual liberation vow, you do so under a precept master, whereas Bodhisattva vow is taken with visualization of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas before you. Of course, you can take it from your Lama, your master, but the procedure for taking the Bodhisattva vow is so when we have someone who has the moksha vow and bodhisattva vow and tantric vow, we call them someone who holds all three vows, vidyadhara with all three vows. Thank you. Dedication verse. See you tomorrow.